Hi, welcome to the Industry 4.0 Club. I'd like to wish a good local time to everyone. If you've found us here today, um, this is our pre-recording for a technical difficulty we had with our live stream with Kathy Anderson. So let's get started. For those who don't know about the I-40 Club, our main purpose is to engage the power of diverse worldwide talent to accelerate the global evolution to Industry 4.0. We do this by hosting respectful, thoughtful, and interdisciplinary open conversations. Our aim is to create quality content on wide-ranging I-40 topics that expand the reach of the community. This is Women in Manufacturing, our usually Monday conversation with a focus on tech and manufacturing. In this space, we discuss the perspectives and challenges of women at work and at home. Our topic of discussion for today is titled Securing Our Future Workforce, Working to Help Manufacturers in Iowa with Training and Employment. I'm Carol Mitchell-Lin, an Industry 4.0 Club co-founder, and for the last 6 years, I've been creating content in manufacturing, specifically in advanced manufacturing accelerator space and software as a service on the shop floor. First, I'd like to introduce my co-host and fellow Industry 4.0 Club co-founder, Grace Donovan. Hi, Grace.
Hello everyone. So excited to be kicking off the 2023 season with you guys. So this is our first broadcast in the new year. We're very excited and starting with a bang, might I add. As Carol mentioned, I am a fellow co-founder of the Industry 4.0 Club and co-host to Carol for our Women in Manufacturing track. And when I'm not here with our incredible guests and my co-founders, I work as the head of business development for the US for Andonix, which is a software as a service company, providing meaningful context from the shop floor for operators and connecting them to the machines and the top floor of the operation. So really excited to be here with you today, Kathy. So as you can surmise, our guest today is Kathy Anderson, and Kathy is responsible for business engagement at the Iowa Workforce Development. Now, Kathy, could you share a little bit about yourself, your new role as the Director of Business Engagement, and how you came to join the Iowa Workforce Development?
Sure, absolutely. It's interesting that my path has definitely not been a linear one that you could, articulate clearly for someone coming out of college. But I am started at Iowa Workforce Development in September 1, in fact. And we'll talk a little bit about that first week and first month in a little bit. But I have previously worked in state government. I worked for about 10 years at the Iowa Economic Development Authority. And in that role, a lot of different responsibilities, events and marketing, primarily marketing to site consultants and showcasing the state of Iowa to those who may be considering Iowa as a location. And then towards the end of my career at the Iowa Economic Development Authority, I was asked if I would consider helping to launch a program called Home Base Iowa. And at that time, it was an idea conceived by our then governor, Terry Branstad, and our Adjutant General for the state of Iowa, and his name is General Tim Moore. And the two of them had been thinking about this for quite a while in terms of really how do we showcase Iowa to the transitioning military community, the service members, their family, and how do we make Iowa, as friendly as possible to transitioning military members. And so that was really a program at that time that was kind of a thought and needed somebody to kind of execute on that. And so that is kind of my first foray into the workforce space. And I absolutely loved launching that program. I loved getting to work with our state leadership on that. And we were pretty successful. Eventually I moved on to another role. But in that role, that Home Base Iowa role, is where I met the current director for Iowa Workforce Development, Beth Townsend. was incredibly impressed with her background, her leadership. She has a military background, and we really have just stayed in touch throughout the years. So when this role came up for business engagement, and she reached out to me to see if it's something I might consider, I was both honored and a little bit intrigued as we talk. I'll share a little bit more about my background in a bit, but what really compelled me about this role was the business engagement piece, and really helping businesses to understand what kinds of resources are available to them and how we can help connect our companies to all of those job seekers.
There's so much there. There's certainly
There's
a
a
lot
lot
to
there.
explore. There is
Like
a
you
lot there.
said.
But so I'm based in Detroit, Michigan, and working in the manufacturing space, we do see a lot of support coming from the state government for manufacturers to make the state more competitive. And I see initiatives across multiple states, and that's certainly in Canada as well, where there's a lot of focus and promotion on making sure that businesses do have access to those resources. But it does take a lot of effort. It certainly takes a lot of time to make sure that those services are, I think, clearly seen and visible, but it's such an important service to provide. And so absolutely really excited to learn more about how Iowa is approaching it, and share best practices across state lines as best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I will take a quick pivot and just share a little bit more. So I have worked in the private sector. I really only talked about my state experience, but I have worked in the private sector in quite a few roles. One of those was with Gateway Computers early in the day, and primarily started in sales, and then in the mobile technologies is where I spent most of my career there. Also worked as a lobbyist for the Siouxland Chamber of Commerce in the Sioux City area. And most recently, I was at Craig Tool, which is a woodworking tool manufacturer, really well-known consumer space, really ingenious tools, really thoughtful. It's thoughtful tools for woodworkers. So that was my most recent role, previous to this. And then also worked at the Iowa Association of Business and Industry. And so that membership base is about 1,500 and serves primarily manufacturers in the state of Iowa. And so, a lot of progressive interest in building in the manufacturing space.
So I'm interested to understand perhaps how your experience, especially in the private sector, working with manufacturers is really informing now your role in the public sector that's focusing to serve those manufacturers. I'm sure there's a lot of valuable insight that you gained from those years, but I'm curious what some of the biggest takeaways perhaps have been that is now being incorporated into your focus.
Sure. One of the, I feel both fortunate in one way, but, COVID was an incredibly challenging time for a lot of companies and a lot of industries. Working at a manufacturer during that time, initially, Craig Tool had a lot of success because people were home. They were building decks, they were building, home improvement projects, or really just using their hands in ways that could build something better, or, so whether that was a planter or a picnic table, or, something for the home, or something as a gift, people were just spending a lot of time using their hands and building, and using Craig tools to do that. And there was a lot of positive response in the marketplace for that. But with COVID, there was also, incredible challenges with supply chain, and, manufacturers were experiencing a lot to keep those tools on the shelves for their customers. And so I was able to see firsthand, what some of those changes in the marketplace, meant as it played out in the manufacturing space. Craig is a pretty, I would say far ahead of the curve type of company. They were already working on, Industry 4.0 types of technologies and initiatives. And while I was there, I was able to help in Iowa. Iowa recently launched a series of technology grants for larger employers, and then also grants for smaller employers. And I really liked the way the state segmented that into applicable technologies and for companies, and kind of how they were thinking about it, what stage they were at in that Industry 4.0 space. So while I was at Craig, I was able to help secure those grants for Craig. And definitely, think that's incredibly important at whatever, whatever stage a company is in and whatever the economy is doing, companies do need to, manufacturers primarily need to make investments into technology to keep efforts moving forward. But the other piece of that is, while my role wasn't in HR, I was on the HR team. And I also saw how through COVID, how taxing that really was for an HR team. And it was also able to see and imagine, play this out among multiple manufacturers, not just in Iowa, but around the globe. And, clearly there were some things that we could do from a workforce perspective that might make that easier for manufacturers as they navigated challenges, whether it's COVID or other challenges. I really was able to see that firsthand. I think I use that experience daily to help inform how I can do a better job here, how I can advocate on behalf of companies when we're reaching out to them, and also, also making things simple for them, because manufacturers have a million things on their plates, and we want to help be a resource, not one more thing they have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And I think it's certainly interesting to see, that you came in at such an interesting time, I think,
Right.
to now have the focus going forward around a lot of like the core challenges that manufacturers are still dealing with kind of in the aftermath of the pandemic.
Kathy, as we're starting the year off, we're in January of 2023, and what are manufacturers thinking about right now? From your experience, talking with manufacturers of all sizes, what's top of mind for them for this year?
Well, that's a great question. I think a couple of different things are coming to mind for me. One, manufacturers have been thinking about workforce and sometimes struggling with workforce for a while. I think for some manufacturers that might be easing a little bit, and others, are still really searching to access that talent. So, but honestly, in Iowa, workforce has been an issue for more than a couple of years. It's, I think, across the Midwest, it's been a topic, right? So I don't think that's necessarily going away. I think it's just changing a little bit. Two, I think supply chain is also still a concern, and maybe not the same concern as it was 18 months ago. But what I'm hearing is it from a little bit more of a component, an individual component perspective, or a location perspective. Where there are challenges here or there, specific components, specific locations, but maybe not quite as challenging as it had been in the past. Definitely workforce. And then, also always important to manufacturers and companies is, regulatory environment and advocacy. And, how do you make this a competitive business environment? That's something that will always be at the forefront, I think, of, business as we're navigating all kinds of changes, right? Not COVID this year, but it's monetary policy. But, I think folks are going to have to, figure out, okay, we were approaching either purchasing or larger manufacturing purchases maybe 18 months ago based on an entirely different monetary policy than what they're probably experiencing right now. So I haven't heard a ton of, direct conversation with manufacturers. It's something more that I'm reading kind of industry wide.
So kind of speaking of, I guess, like hearing, directly from manufacturers, I'm curious what sort of ways that, Iowa Workforce Development is getting in touch with manufacturers. I think that is often because, like you mentioned, manufacturers have a million things on their plate and you don't want to be that one more thing. But in the effort to provide support, you do need to get input and feedback from manufacturers. And I know that can be a challenge for a lot of organizations that really set out to help manufacturers, but they're competing for a lot of their time. So I'm curious how you guys approach that in terms of getting that feedback so that you can provide, relevant and timely support.
Well, the first thing that we did, so my leader, Tim Goodwin, and I started on September 1st and to help launch this business engagement division. And pretty quickly after that, we launched a 100-day outreach plan in which team members across the state, and I'll talk a little bit more about the role of the business engagement consultant specifically, but basically between Tim and I and Iowa Workforce Development Leadership and this team of business engagement consultants really focused for 100 days on reaching out to employers. So manufacturers, but also other employers in other industries. Healthcare is also an industry that's experiencing, workforce concerns right now. But as we reached out to them, one of our thoughts was, there are so many resources that we have available for employers, and yet we knew it was just reaching the tip of the iceberg in terms of how many employers actually knew what kinds of resources were available to them and how to access them, and right.
Yeah.
And so that 100-day outreach was really important for us to just get, it wasn't an hour and a half sit down, let us tell you every resource that we have for you. It was really a quick half hour, just kind of introductory conversation, but primarily based on listening to the company, listening to that manufacturer, finding out where they're at in their company life cycle, finding out where they're at in terms of employment needs, even finding out, have you accessed any of the tools or resources through Iowa Workforce Development in the past? For some of them, they may have, but if with a turnover in HR or turnover in certain roles, they weren't exactly sure what that looked like. And in other cases, they had accessed that, but one part of the company didn't know that the other part of the company was hosting a career fair in partnership with us at their own facility on that day. And not every part of the company was aware of that, right? And that just reflects the reality of what's going on in companies right now, depending on the company size, depending on all the things on their plates. Sometimes it's a communication, it's just a communication, didn't know about it, and other times it's no, we had no idea what was available. And yeah, please, we are thankful that you're here is what we heard very consistently. I'm just thankful for the proactive outreach. And then the other thing that we heard was, yeah, let's work together. I absolutely am interested in finding out, how we can make this easier.
Yeah. And specifically kind of in the area, again, focus is workforce development and getting talented individuals to employers who need them. I know that there's programs that you guys offer that include relationships between the state of Iowa, manufacturers and employers, and colleges. So could you tell me a little bit more about how you guys are generating a talent pipeline and how important involving colleges is to the success of these overall initiatives? And do you have any stories that you can share in your time with Iowa Workforce Development where you've seen that play out successfully?
That's a great connection, because really it is going to take every partner coming to the table together to really put some meaningful solutions together, right? I think we all realize that at this point. You asked about a couple of stories. I do have a few. One is so in one area of the state. First of all, let me just share a little bit about the role of the business engagement consultant.
Yeah.
So we have about a team of 20 across the state, and they are all in local areas. And they report to me, but they work regionally and with regional partners. And so what's been incredible about that is the business engagement consultant, as they're going out to talk to companies, and they're finding out, okay, what's the baseline? What has worked in the past? What hasn't? And companies have shared some of that information. So in some cases, companies who used to work with us quite a bit, had turnover, and so now they're interested in partnering again. And one of those situations, it was really, I have several stories I could share, but I'm going to start with this one. Our business engagement consultant helped them in terms of just posting a job, which is something that we do for free for companies at no cost. Within 24 hours, we can help post their jobs and make it a little more visible. So one of our business engagement consultants did that. Also did a little additional marketing. So a Facebook post, I think, but not a lot more than that, but within a day or two, being in front of, by posting that job and that additional Facebook marketing, the employer had over 50 applicants for a position that in the past had been incredibly difficult to fill. So we're starting to see some of those successes. We're starting to see that when those partnerships come together, companies are really seeing the benefit of that. And now, certainly, I'm not here to say that, for every role we can come up with 50 applicants. It's not what I mean, but by really creative partnering and by really serving those manufacturers, we are making a dent, and we are getting some applicants to some of those hard to fill positions. But part of that, of course, is, applicants is great, but you also need them to be skilled, and you also need them to have the background that can step into that role and do it successfully. And that's, I think, where one of the key ways that the community colleges in this case have been really successful and really helpful, because they're helping to train our workforce, for taking them from a fairly unskilled workforce to more of a skilled workforce. And that doesn't happen without, concerted effort and training and partnerships. And so they are really good, strong partners of ours, in addition to the Regent institutions, which, engineering talent, those types of role are important to manufacturing as well. Of course, in manufacturing, you have every type of discipline. You have marketing, you have engineering, you have the business roles where, that future leadership pipeline is coming. But I think for the most part, you're probably experiencing this in Michigan as well. It's that skilled talent. It's bringing in those, especially as we're thinking the topics Industry 4.0, like that does require an additional technology skill base that is important to our manufacturers moving forward.
Yeah, it's absolutely a challenge, I think, like across the board. And we've certainly had a lot of conversations, with the Industry 4.0 Club in general, around really that important relationship, specifically between community colleges and employers, where there is a lot of like back and forth dialogue, where the college can also say, what skills are in high demand for your industry trends, so I can better prepare my students, but then also making sure that they're showcasing their students and providing opportunities for like hands-on learning. When it comes to developing skilled talent, now with Industry 4.0 as well, I think some of the fears are abating among the workforce. And this is kind of, from conversations that we've had with a lot of people that are working in automation, that when they go onto the floor and they're working with, folks on the front line saying, hey, we're here to automate some tasks, like the reception is no longer, you're here to take my job. It's, oh, great, you're here to take away the stuff that I don't want to do, that is busy work that's taking up a lot of my time. We're talking like highly repetitive tasks. So it is really shifting, but now we do have a greater need for, data scientists that are going to be processing all of this data that is now coming off of the shop floor, or technicians that are skilled to be able to service these machines, because providers might be based, in California and providing robots or automation solutions or technology solutions, across the country, across the globe. And you need to have people on hand with those skills to provide it. And it can be an expense for the employer to take on, especially if you're not finding it naturally in the marketplace. So having that conjunction of colleges, but then also employers willing to invest in training, is all ways that we're working towards it. And that's certainly what I see, here in Michigan, as well, with dedicated focus on investing in technology to keep our manufacturers and our employers competitive, but then also making sure that we are working with our education institutions to provide the right skills to that industry, so that doesn't fall on their shoulders entirely.
I would like to actually focus more on the colleges, and we see this in Ontario, where the manufacturers and the colleges are working together, and it's having an impact on what the colleges are focusing and offering. So it's a bit of a back and forth. It's not just the colleges sending the students to the manufacturers, and manufacturers are saying, hey, this is what we need people that are skilled in XYZ, and they're having that conversation with the colleges so they can better prepare their students and their curriculum for what's happening in the field, in real life. Are you seeing that at all as well, Kathy?
Yeah, there's a really good example of that here in so while our team is across the state, I'm based more in the Des Moines area. And in the suburb of Des Moines, there is a high-tech manufacturer called AccuMold. And while that AccuMold name isn't maybe a consumer brand name, it's definitely a company that in this area is really well respected, highly regarded, very technical in nature. And they have an incredible partnership with DMAC, which is Des Moines Area Community College. And that partnership has been going for years. It's been mutually beneficial, but the company is very involved in terms of scholarships, making sure that training program is a very robust training program. It's an incredible partnership. I think it's one that, the entire country could really emulate and learn so much from. But we see partnerships like that, across. AccuMold and DMAC is probably one of our more highly publicized ones, but we do see those partnerships around the state. Also in the Fairfield area, we have some manufacturers. One of them is the CEO is an incredible female CEO, second generation owner of agro-industrial plastics. The CEO is phenomenal. She's been a great leader for that area, really invested in the community, and also really, really strong partner with her community college. And they've created a really cool partnership as well. Also, when, it's a smaller area of the state, it's not nearly as populated as Des Moines area. And, but it's an equally beneficial partnership. And it's one that Lori just saw the wisdom in investing into that partnership really early. And so it's definitely benefited both the company, but also the community college as well. And everybody who's participated in that program and working at a company like Agro-Industrial Plastics. Another thing that we've been seeing is work-based learning opportunities. So in other words, providing those opportunities for students to see what does real world work look like, and how might I play a role in that, and what are my unique skills and interests and drives, and what can I contribute to that. And so we have had some longer standing efforts with work-based learning. I think we'll only just increase that over the next couple of years. But one thing, I think Michigan has a pretty strong apprenticeship program as well, but Iowa actually leads the nation in the number of current apprentices.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I think that is just an incredible win. It's a win for the employer. It's a win for the young adult. It's a win for the institutions that are training. And, there's just a really, that apprenticeship plan is just such a nice plan that keeps kind of everybody on the same page. I just love that kind of programming and that kind of approach to training for the long term. And in fact, I have a nephew who's in a apprenticeship program he absolutely loves. And this isn't something that would have been on his radar even 2 or 3 years ago. And now it is. And, he has a young family, and, he loves his work, loves where he lives. I think it's just paying off dividends, both for the employer, for the state, but also, for that young family as well. So,
Yeah,
and just back to your trend, I see, that kind of hands-on, I see the apprenticeship model just growing.
That's excellent. And I think, having those quick iteration and kind of like feedback loops with work-based learning, as you mentioned, allows you to get like really quickly, an idea of, oh, I like this, I want to carry on, or this isn't for me, let's try something else. That avoids a lot of trial and error and kind of longer feedback loops that not only pose difficulties for employers trying to find the right talent, but also workers trying to find something that, again, gives them joy and purpose and leaves them fulfilled at the end of the day. And I think that's something that, is just really, we all want to see, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Kathy, I was wondering if you're seeing similarly with the younger cohort. For example, Manufacturing Day likes to bring manufacturers in, likes to have open houses where they can bring young high school kids or even younger for tours of the facility. Are you seeing that an active part of the manufacturers there?
It really is. So Manufacturing Day last year, I know I should remember the number. I don't know, but I will research that and follow up. But there were definitely in every county and across our state, there were Manufacturing Day efforts. The Association of Business and Industry also helps to promote that. But another group in Iowa called CIRRUS, which is part of the Iowa State University family. They are very, very active and involved in terms of helping to promote Manufacturing Day opportunities for students to get into manufacturing facilities. A couple of those, Vermeer Manufacturing is a manufacturer in Pella, Iowa, and they have for years opened the doors so that students in their area can really see what manufacturing looks like firsthand. Mary Andringa was she was the CEO. Now her son, Jason Andringa, is the CEO. But while she was at the helm for years, that was a very big priority for her. She was also very involved in National Association Manufacturers. So for her, it was just second nature, almost like breathing, to make sure that that next generation could see what manufacturing looked like, and that it's no longer what you might have imagined not to look like in the 50s and 60s, but it truly is, a really clean, welcoming space where creative problem solvers can come and bring their best selves to their work every day.
Excellent. And I'm happy to hear that there's a female CEO who kind of paved the way for that area, and that's always nice to see, especially for younger girls who are interested in STEM. And I think that's a great opportunity for a tour of the manufacturing facility, definitely. Now, I knew that from my research that Iowa Workforce Development has a lot of programs. Definitely one of the ones that caught my eye, I was really interested in learning more about, was the Industrial New Jobs Training Program. And maybe if you could let people know about it, especially if somebody in the state is watching, and how they can get in touch if there's interest.
Absolutely. So that has actually been a really successful program in Iowa for a long time. In fact, you might almost call it one of our secret sauces, right? Is that we do have a robust training partnership program, which is what I really think of that. Within the state, a lot of times it's referred to as the 260E F&G programs. And so if a company would like to explore that a little bit, they can do that in a couple of different ways. One, I'll provide the link in the chat afterwards so that if companies are interested, they can kind of take a look at that on our website, and I'll just provide that link right to that program. But there are iterations of it. So the 260E program is for those companies that are looking to hire new employees and to train new employees. And then the 260F program is more for existing employees, training existing employees. Now, there are some, criteria for each of these programs. One, it's interstate commerce is an important piece of that, and also specific industries. Manufacturing is one of those. But it also does depend, on what you're selling and where and those types of things. So there's a little bit of digging to do from a company perspective. But I tell you what, there is a list or there's a group of folks at all of the community colleges across the state who really help companies navigate. Okay, does this program apply for you? The community colleges are also actually the ones who do the bonding for that training program. And then it's more administered by the Iowa Workforce Development. But it's a great partnership. It's something that a lot of companies have been able to take advantage of and use that to upskill or to train. Like I said, one program's for existing employees, another one's for new employees. It's really an incredible program, one that is, that Iowa has benefited from, and so have many manufacturers across the state. I'm trying to keep that as simple as possible. I don't want to get too far in the weeds,
Yes.
but the criteria is on our website. It's pretty easy to navigate, and then we can also connect them with the community college in their area for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So folks want more information, check out the link in the description below. We'll make sure that it's there, and then encourage you to connect with Kathy on LinkedIn if you need more details. Absolutely. So we want to make sure that you get that information where you need it.
Well, the other thing that I'll do is there's a document that I shared. I can share that in the comments as well. But really, that's just an avenue for companies. If they haven't worked with anybody for a workforce solution, if they're in that camp where they really, don't know where to go, or maybe they've had some HR transition on their team and and aren't exactly sure how to access some of the resources available. We do have a QR code that will take them right to our page, but we also have an email address, a self-scheduler form where companies can schedule it based on a time that's convenient for them, a phone line that's answered for businesses, particularly for this reason, to help them explore what resources are available to them. So all of those things are available. And we've tried to make it as easy as possible for companies to just raise a hand and say, hey, contact me and even at this time. And we'd love to be
Sure
able to
sounds
help
like
do
it.
that. We have a
Now,
great leader on
okay.
our team who actually was a female. She was a CEO of her family company. She's now helping to lead this effort. And she talks frequently about the easy button and about, how do we constantly keep that at the forefront of our minds? How do we make this as easy as possible for our employers to access the resources? And that's what we keep at the forefront of our mind all the time.
Absolutely. In my line of work, we refer to that as, the add-on cord. So just an SOS help button. Anytime a manufacturer runs into a problem, that's really what we're looking for in terms of make it easy for people to just become visible and get the help that they need just by raising a hand or saying, hey, I need these skills, I need these workers, and I have this problem on the line, and getting a solution and having people that are responsive and waiting in the wings to help. Definitely is the other part of making that easy, right? It's on both sides.
Yep.
So now pivoting a little bit towards, we were talking about some of the new jobs that we're seeing and trends in terms of the industry, in terms of what we're looking at in terms of skills. And one of those is data analysis. Especially with Industry 4.0 and connecting a lot of machines, connecting a lot of people, investing in digital technology, we're generating significant amounts of data as an industry. And certainly there's the comparison of, data is the new oil. It's incredibly valuable. And so how is the Iowa Workforce Development Program using data to help improve programs, to create new ones, and all around just look at employers in terms of where trends are going, what data that, how is that informing kind of your programs and offerings?
Okay, so to be clear, I didn't plant this question, but I'm really glad you asked it because
Yep.
pretty much from right after we started visiting companies, I'd say even still in September, folks were asking, okay, now, what are you doing moving forward? And it's like, wait, I'm not developing a plan to move forward until I know what companies are telling us, and we can, we're here to serve them. So I want to make sure that I'm not creating what Kathy Anderson thinks is a good idea. What we should be doing is creating what our companies are saying they need. And so that 100-day effort, we did capture, kind of the essence of those meetings to find out, okay, are we on the right track? We think we are, but maybe we're not. And so you want to also know that. And then also get a feel for, what programs have they tried, which ones have worked, which ones, haven't they tried or don't know about. So even just getting some real baseline information in terms of, okay, are we heading the right direction was really, really important to me before we made any additional plans. And so now that we have that data, we are using that. We're starting to unveil that with our partners, our key partners across the state. So tomorrow we're having a conversation with our local workforce development boards. That's a really important piece of the whole workforce ecosystem. So that conversation's tomorrow, just kind of sharing with them what we learned from those first 100 days. And then also next week, we're working primarily with our economic developers across the state. So in Iowa, we're fortunate we have two leaders, our Beth Townsend, who leads Iowa Workforce Development, and Debbie Durham, who leads our Iowa Economic Development Authority. Not only are they both strong, great leaders, they also work really well together and understand the value in us making this as seamless as possible for companies. So we'll be sharing a lot of that data out in the next couple of weeks and figuring out, okay, now that we know this, and some of it's, not earth-shattering, some of it is surprising, figure out the plan for, how we all work together and then make this as easy as possible for our companies and also as beneficial as possible for, our economy moving forward. I think it's the heart of every decision you're making should be data informed. And just to add to that, we talked a little bit about, that data on that need for data and analytics from the information from the manufacturing floor. There is a time too where, gosh, how long do you collect information before you decide, okay, here's what we know for sure. Here's our next step forward. And then you have to also realize that there's an iterative part of this, and you're going to take the data you see, you're going to try some things, you're going to learn if it works or not, if it's helpful or not, and then, reinform and try something new. But, I think both parts of those are really, really important. And I think it's good to have really strong people who can help you figure out when you're too far in data analysis to the point of paralysis versus action. And so I think that's not a question that's always easy and clear within your walls. So good leadership and good data and good analytics and good strategy helps all of that.
So I was at a manufacturing technology conference last month, and one of our manufacturing thought leaders was speaking from Automation Alley, and was referring to it as minimum viable investment. Oftentimes we think of minimum viable product to get out there, but he was encouraging manufacturers and encouraging employers to invest small amounts in new technologies, in new strategies, and really see what does the data then send back to you. But instead of putting all your bets on one horse, really spread it around and figure out for yourself what is going to be a minimum viable investment in these new innovative technologies that are then going to show us the results that we need. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of mindset shift for a lot of leaders to then set aside budget for doing these things, and again collecting this data, figuring out that time frame, what makes sense for us to make decisions based on the data that we're collecting, but then be able to iterate much faster because you have this unique investment strategy and focusing on innovation and really where your next competitive advantage is coming from. So I thought that was an excellent soundbite that I wanted to share.
Yes, I love that too. And that also helps from an employee experience perspective, because you see that this isn't scary. This is helpful. This helps us make better decisions. It helps us to do our jobs better. It helps, sometimes helps communicate better things that are happening maybe on the front lines that maybe a level or two up, they're not always aware of. And it actually can many times help be that venue for communication that maybe didn't exist before. I think it can be helpful in so many ways. I love that approach.
Absolutely.
I really like the idea, Kathy, you mentioned benchmarking, because people do like to know how they're measuring up against another manufacturer within their sector. They like to know where they stand, and sometimes that's a very interesting motivator, especially if they have through the data some indication of how they can make a difference to improve maybe that difference between them and whoever might be ahead of them.
One of the things when I was at the Iowa Association of Business and Industry, one of my roles there was actually a convener of our CFO group, so chief financial officers, and so helping to program for that group of CFOs who shared best practices. But then also we started one for plant managers, so kind of more closer to the line. Either operations managers, those involved in manufacturing, really from an operations perspective and a strategy perspective. And one of the things that we are so fortunate to see is that so many of them were willing to share not just, the best practices and what was working and where they were struggling, but even open up their floor and offer tours to each other for some of that best practice sharing. There's just such a wealth that you can learn when you're working together, and frankly shortening the learning curve on whatever thing that you're either exploring or wondering about or kind of vetting. Maybe sometimes it's, have you worked with them, and was it was it a helpful experience or not? Or have you worked with this technology, or what would you do differently? If you were to implement it all over again, and those things are incredibly valuable as well.
We get constant requests from manufacturers that we're in discussions with to see different technologies in action. And there's a couple in facilities I'm aware of, one in Michigan and then one in Ohio as well, where it's just a technology center where you can go and see it in action, touch and feel, and it's just a playground for manufacturers to like look around and see, okay, how can I apply this technology to my business? And having those opportunities, like I liken it to the startup world where we get maker spaces where you can go in and like use small scale 3D printers or other technology that's going to help you get your product to market. But for manufacturers, it's going to be slightly different. You're going to need to see like a robotic assembly line, in process, or how different technology painting, can work. So there's a lot there. And the one in Detroit called Lift, also like it's a public-private partnership. They are incredible ways for manufacturers to again figure out what is going to be beneficial to them.
Yeah, specifically in Iowa, we do have one of those. It's with Cirrus, so with Iowa State University, and one of the things, I guess, if people had questions, that they could contact me, or they could just reach out to Cirrus. It's CIRAS. They Google that, they'll be able to find this. But there is a new cobot lab, which allows you to see firsthand. And Cirrus started a long time ago, opening up kind of a 3D lab for manufacturers to see, those technologies firsthand. And now that they have a cobot lab where you can see how these cobots actually interact, all kinds of different kinds, and how they interact. Because, cobots typically interact on the line with humans. And so you can kind of see that interaction, which is something that's not always easy to picture. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of picture it from I don't know, sometimes a Jetsons perspective, but as you see it on the line, and how the interactions actually work, and how they can be really so intuitive and helpful. Though I would encourage every manufacturer to take as many opportunities as they can to check out new technologies and see how it's actually working, as you think about bringing those in.
Trade shows was a way that I was able to like first get exposure to those like cobots and understand a little bit what that's like. Of course, like if you're a manufacturer, you have your own line. If you're able to visit, other folks that are opening their doors, that's certainly a way to see it. But also, attending trade shows, which are making an incredible comeback now after the pandemic. It's a great way to see again all the new technology that's out there and interact. And I kind of had fun, approaching a robot and making it slow down and like coming back, just it's kind of fun to play with in a way. Of course, in a very safe environment.
It is. Of course.
Yes, safety first. Now, I think we're approaching the end of our time. And over the course of our conversation, you have mentioned a number of female leaders, not in the private sector as well as in the public sector, that are really focusing on experience of their employees, improving the bottom line of their companies, making sure that the local economies are going to be running strong. And I think it's fantastic just to see so many women in leadership positions that are doing excellent work, of course, such as yourself. And we still know that manufacturing is very male dominated, especially on the floor and oftentimes in leadership positions. So I'm curious, with the workforce development initiatives, if there's anything that's focused specifically on women and girls and their advancement in this industry in particular, how are you looking at like women and female empowerment, through the lens of workforce development?
Yeah, that's a great question, because what's been really fortunate is the women that I have worked with in leadership in manufacturing companies, they don't even necessarily think about, I am a woman leading. It's I am a leader. I happen to be a woman, and I'm gonna help lead this because leadership's what's needed. So that has been incredible for me to see in my career, and also to work with and experience. But one of the things I would say about, primarily a little bit of that topic is during COVID, we saw a large, and this is pretty well documented. I think I
Mhm.
first read about it in the Wall Street Journal, and I don't know if it was March or April or exactly what month it was, but I do remember that was the first time I read about the large number of women, especially women in leadership roles, who were extremely taxed with
Yeah.
everything that was on their plate during COVID. And so whether that was, education, while education went virtual and came
Mhm.
home, and taking care of teams, many of those team members, some of them may have still been in the plant and others may have been remote, and every team member is experiencing kind of a unique and different situation during COVID, and helping to coach and manage through all of that, right? As you're also leading large company initiatives that, oh, by the way, just because it's COVID doesn't mean, the competitive, the competitive strategies were changing. Like, you know, things didn't stop just because it was COVID.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, all of those things together, as I was, reading about that early on, one of the things that we did at Craig Tool, and this wasn't a state program, it was our CEO at that time kind of heard um, me voice my thoughts and my concerns about our female leaders, and even seeing if there was something that we could do to kind of take a little bit of that load off their plates. And so our CEO was incredibly was willing to just imagine this with me, and we instituted basically a company-wide tutoring program. And we partnered with the local tutoring company. Sylvan Learning is who we use locally, and really came up with a couple of different scenarios in which our employees could get tutoring help, and we paid for it as a company. Now, part of that was, that was just a really big concern at the time. It was a big
Mhm.
unknown in terms of what this was going to look like and how this might impact long-term learning. And so, we just offered it. And for those employees who took advantage of it, there was tremendous gratitude for, thinking about one thing that kind of helped lighten the load. It also
Mhm.
helped from a family perspective, one less worry that they had. And this wasn't the plan, but it really helped with retention as well. So any of those families who participated, we didn't really have a retention issue at all. So that was an incredible learning. That we have a great CEO at Craig Tool, and he was willing to try it, right, to see if
Mhm.
it would be helpful. That was really successful. Larger scale, our governor, and then also through leaders through economic development and workforce development, childcare is a concern. And
Yeah.
if there's one thing that came to light during COVID is, golly, you can't take your childcare for granted. And those supplies are tight, especially, in rural areas a little bit more so than some of our more urban areas. So there have been 2 different rounds of childcare programming and grants to help companies. If the company wants to help solve some of that issue for their employees, or if it's from a childcare provider and it's just, brick and mortar, or just, how do we create more of them? Again, great vision, great leadership came together to bring some of those solutions to the table. So while that's not necessarily a program dedicated just to the female workforce, it certainly is something that, if you don't have good childcare,
Mhm.
somebody in the family needs to stay home. And so, and a lot of families make that choice intentionally, but what I'm referring to is more, how do we, for those families who, they both spouses want to work, and childcare is the issue for that. This program has been really, really good in terms of helping to meet those needs, helping to create supply in an area where just the demand has been through the roof. The long
Yeah.
stories, but a couple of different perspectives on that.
To summarize, like in a very quick way, it's really looking at what are the needs of our workforce, and in some ways, like, that are more commonly felt by women specifically in terms of, again, online education, tutoring, whether or not you are trying to learn yourself or you're, serving as a tutor for your children, or again, that childcare portion. So these are things that, oftentimes you don't really see within the workforce, but as a company, you're looking beyond just what happens inside these four walls that is affecting and affecting my employees. How can I kind of support them so that they can show up at work and do their best work and not be too tired, too burnt out? So looking beyond just what's happening inside my four walls as an employer and how can I support my employees just across the board are incredible ways to make career choices much more viable and sustainable for women. So that's very encouraging. Very excited to hear that experiment and that it was successful, and I'm unsurprised that it helps with retention. Absolutely unsurprised. So if folks are, feeling the pressure in terms of retention, think beyond the four walls of what's going on inside, the place of employment and how you can support employees there. So thank you. That's encouraging for sure.
I like the micro level problem solving to the needs. Sometimes people they ask for national, state level policies and solutions to blanket cover everything, and then wonder why things didn't happen. But I like these little micro stories because sometimes it gets to the core of where people need help, and probably they were able to deliver that much faster than if they had to do a needs assessment and go on, continue on this way. I think it was just done, and so I really like stories like that. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Yeah, once we landed, and we did survey our employees, within that population to see, okay, this is what we're thinking. We think there's a need. Is there? Would you use this? And those survey that was very iterative. The surveys came back very quickly and overwhelmingly positive. And so then we were able to move pretty quickly because we not only knew what options were available to us, but also which ones our employees really cared about and wanted to take advantage of. So that was just an incredible, it was an incredible service to my fellow team members, and I was just incredibly thankful that we had a CEO who had that kind of vision.
Great. Now, if you could let people know how to reach you, and maybe or how to reach the Iowa Workforce Development as well.
Sure. To reach me directly, they're welcome to send an email. My email is Kathy, KATHY.Anderson, ANDERSON @IWD.Iowa, spelled out IOWA.gov. Happy to answer any questions or connect some resources, whatever that looks like. And two, I would say to access the Iowa Workforce website, I would do a couple of things. One, I'm going to include in a chat feature or within a comment, I'll include an attachment, which is a QR code. So if they're a company who is interested in scheduling time to explore what those resources might be, maybe they want to call, maybe it's an email, maybe it's a scheduling the appointment themselves, we're happy to do that however it works for the company. They're also welcome to just connect with us on Google Iowa Workforce Development, and one of those top pages should show business engagement, and we're happy to connect that way as well. I think those are the easiest ways to direct folks to the full spectrum of resources, and then we can help them narrow down from there based on where they're at in their business life cycle and what industry they're in.
Great. And then you would assign them.
Yep, we'll connect them to a person in their area. Yep.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us today. And we appreciate your knowledge and experience, especially sharing it with us and with others. And really, that's a big part of what our conversation is today and what we're doing. And if for those that are watching the video, if you like conversations like this, look at our LinkedIn Live page or our YouTube video for more videos like this. And guess that's it. Oh, we encourage you to join, follow us on LinkedIn. That's it. Thank you.
Yes, have a wonderful
Thank
rest of your
you.
day. Thanks, everyone.
Yep, you too.